Our first speaker for this morning is Dr. Riwanto Tirtosudarmo, who holds a PhD in social demography from the Research School of Social Sciences at the Australian National University in Canberra, Australia. Since 1980, he's been working with the Indonesian Institute of Sciences, LIPI, and he retired in 2017 and is now an independent researcher working on issues of migration, urbanization, political demography, ethnicity, and territorial politics. Since 2000, he has been focusing on the social transformation in Java's North Coast cities, the politics of cultural heritage, and the local Adat communities in Java. In the course of his professional life, he has been a visiting professor, a visiting senior fellow, and a visiting senior researcher in various universities and research institutes around the world. He has published extensively in scientific and popular journals and has authored a number of books on political demography and the politics of population mobility in Indonesia and Southeast Asia. Our second speaker is Dr. Nympha Pinky Ojena, who is a professor of demography at the University of the Philippines Population Institute in UP Diliman and is an affiliate faculty at the Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics at the College of Public Health in UP Manila. She is currently the chairperson of the Interagency Committee on Migration Statistics of the Philippine Statistics Authority and the Secretary General of the Asian Population Association. Dr. Ojena completed her education from the University of the Philippines with a Bachelor of Science in Statistics and a Master of Arts in Demography. She obtained her PhD in Sociology and Demography, a dual degree program from the Pennsylvania State University. Dr. Ojena is a recipient of the Department of Science and Technology Balik Scientist Award, the 2002 Gawad Chancellor para sa pinakamahusay na mananaliksik or Chancellor's Award for Best Researcher in the Social Sciences and Law Cluster of the University of the Philippines in Diliman, and the 2012 Achievement Award from the National Research Council of the Philippines. Okay, so may I now call on Dr. Riwanto to make his presentation. Dr. Riwanto, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Stella, for the introductions. And first of all, I also like to thank the organizers, especially Georgie, who insists to me that I have to speak on this very important meeting, which I actually rather reluctant because, to be honest, as you see on my CV, I have moved to many other areas instead of migration. So you can imagine that my my knowledge on the situations at the moment is rather out of date. But I cannot refuse George's request, and I, instead of maybe giving something more empirical, I offer a kind of perspective to see the problem we are facing at the moment with COVID-19 and what is apparently interconnection with our interest on migrations. So I'm wondering whether you could put my slide instead of me, or okay, thank you, Stella. Yes, well, I only have 5 slides, so I hope I will have enough time to present what I have in mind. And my title is Migration in Time of COVID-19, and I offer a political demographic perspective, which maybe some of you are familiar with my kind of focus, which I always put migration on the political demography perspective. So please, the slide 1, please. Yes, I think it's just to revive your memories that political demography as a study of the dynamics interactions between demographic variables and political change. And politics, we know, concerned with power and authority, where state and capital market control it. And on the other side, we have seen demography basically concerned with size, structures, compositions, and distributions of populations. Certainly, migrations, as I see it, as the most vibrant demographic variables that provoke and impacted political changes. So I always view migrations as one of the important variables within demography compared with other demographic vitals like fertility or mortality, because migration is so closely related with other social and political variables. So it's always interesting to see how migration is then interfaces with political changes. And if you see the fundamental elements in political democracy, is then we cannot avoid at the moment is state and policies. And I think it's becoming more important is market and regulations. And of course, the demographic configuration itself. And I really learned a lot from the previous speakers who shows how then we still rely on the state to produce statistics, the statistics, but also from other sources. But again, I think as I see it, at least from my perspective, I mean, maybe it's also applied to the Philippines and other Southeast Asian countries, the state is still becoming dominating elements when we talk about political democracy. Next slide, please. So I reflect on this when we talk about COVID-19 and its relation with, I call it migration path, then we are actually talking on at least two levels. Of course, we are talking about international migrations, but at the same time, we are talking about domestic or national migrations, pathways, I call it pathways. And it's becoming more and more clear that there is a strong overlapping between the COVID-19 spreading or the transmissions with the movement of people. I think this is something that we as a migration scholars becoming very aware how important then movement of people in spreading the COVID-19. So when we talk about COVID-19 at the moment or maybe in the near futures, migration should be counted as an important variable. And I think it's become very clear as well how human interactions and COVID-19 diffusion is also something that we are becoming familiar. I mean, distancing has become kind of a keyword at the moment. We have to remember about the social distancing and so on, which again, I think how closely related the human interactions with the transmission of COVID-19. Then I think it's becoming also very interesting to see whether COVID-19 has an impact. And I think this is a very important moment to reflect at the moment, whether what I call it demobilizations and de-globalization is actually on the horizons, or we are experiencing these two kind of things. Yeah? The idea of demobilizations and de-globalizations. And I think that is what we have seen so far. If we want to prevent the spread of COVID-19, then we have to, in fact, stop people to move, or we have to really make a surveillance to the movement of peoples, and a lot of kind of policies at the moment. And I think we have experienced what we call it lockdown. So this is something that an indications of how the idea of mobilization and de-globalization actually operating at the moment, both at the national and the international level. And when we come to the economy, or the economic situation, then as I see it, at least from the Indonesian perspective, the pandemic is a kind of opening a Pandora box. And as I see from the Indonesian experience, so we can see, I don't know in other countries, but I guess maybe this is also similar issues. The issues of inequality and class structures become very important, because then we can see how actually who can work from home and who cannot able to work from home. And of course, the underclass, or the lower class, are people who cannot avoid. They have to move out from their house to find jobs, and so on and so on. In the case of Indonesia, certainly the informal sectors and so on. And the idea of work from home is really beyond their, I think, their imaginations. So what I mean by opening Pandora box, then you can see how actually our society is becoming show some kind of more exposed inequality. We are more aware about that, and also we have to see now the society in terms of the class, economic class structures. So then this is what I then reflected at the moment. I think the pressing issues then, instead of course we can talk about the technicalities about COVID-19, but something that in my mind is that the social justice has become more critical to be seen at the moment. Please, next slide. So then, as I always interested on the on the politics of migrations, then we actually moving at the moment to the kind of forced mobility or forced immobility, and its repercussions. So with COVID, I think we have seen how people are forced not to move, are forced not to mobile, not to migrate, and so on. So the question is then, what is the repercussions, social, economic, and political repercussions of this kind of situations? So in my view, that there seems likely there is a new kind of forced migration is on our horizon at the moment. We move, not only move, but maybe there is an additional kind of forced migration with COVID-19. And of course, then we will see kind of forced return migrations from, of course, abroad to our country, from city to the rural areas, from cities to other cities, because of this kind of forced migration. And in the case of Indonesia, for example, it's very clear with this kind of return forced migration, because the city actually has become a locus of the pandemic, and there is a kind of then force people who have been laid down, for example, from the industries and so on, to move back to the countryside, and it's also become a problem at both the cities and the rural area. And another thing that I already mentioned before, I think it's also mentioned by previous speakers, is that the rise of a kind of state surveillance. Yeah? I mean, the state has become more active in surveilling the movement of people. I think that is also another important feature. But also then we become more aware about the market dominance. And on the other side, then we see how people resist to the kind of new political situations, new economic kind of conditions, and so and there is we can see how people actually resist to this kind of new situation. So I think it's also mentioned by previous speakers that there is an urgency of the academia and of course civil society movements in advocating the what's that, how the what they call it, the precarious life of the depressing class, the lower class, the poor, and so on and so on, the migrant workers, the urban poor, and so on. So I think that is becoming more kind of pressing issues. So I think we are moving toward more in my views, especially in the case of Indonesia, more authoritarian or well, maybe on the other side, then a democratic virtual world, because then the virtual world is becoming more important now. And I see also the increasing, well, maybe it's not very clear, but I have seen streams of people are moving irregularly. I think just a few weeks ago, I think there was a ship sink or detained because of they are taking some Indonesian laborer to Malaysia, for example. I think this kind of irregular migrations might be the case. Besides, I think there is a strong surveillance of the government, because of, again, people resist to the situations, people trying to find out their way to get away from this economic difficulties. Next, please. So I think this is the one that I think Georgie and the organizer are actually asking. What kind of how we interrogate the method, how we interrogate the data collection, and so on and so on. So I put it on a more kind of broader way. What kind of new questions then arise from this situation? So first, I think again, my maybe bias toward this kind of views, that we have to contextualizing the class structures and inequality both at the international and national level. I think it's become very clear in my view that then you have seen who are the high class and who are the middle class and who are the lower class, both at the level of international and the national level. And then I think there's a question how we count the cost. Yeah, by cost, and then of course we can talk about economic cost, but what is always difficult is how we count the social costs in the situation. Who win and who lost at the different level of analysis, at the level of individual, family, community, etc. And of course, I think the two previous speakers is very clear the daunting task for us when we have to talk about the availability of data, the validity of data, the accuracy of data. And then I think we have, in the light of the new research questions, we have to give more attention to the issues of inhibiting social relations. I think that is the impact of the, what I call it, de-mobilizations or de-globalizations. And I started to, observe there is a kind of fracturing communities, both in the cities and the rural areas, because of this new situations of COVID-19, which bring a lot of problems with people's difficulties and so on. I think there is a kind of inhibiting social relations, and we have seen a kind of development of fracturing communities. I think which for me is rather worrying, because so far I think not erupted into a kind of conflict, but I can see there is a kind of potential of the economic difficulties and the problem of the people at the grassroots levels. And then I think the question of, this is something that I don't think we have talked so far about how we kind of use the, what we call it, the big data. I mean, of course, the Central Bureau of Statistics is collecting censuses, surveys, and so on, but I think it's becoming more and more available, what we call it, the big data from other sources, yeah, which is available in the virtual worlds. I think this is something that is important at the moment, because when we have stuck with demobilization, then lockdown and so on, I think then the virtual world has become very important. And I think a lot of data is available at the virtual world, and the question is who actually in charge on that, because it's not unless we believe in the a very strong authoritarian state, but it's becoming open sources and everybody can access, and of course the corporations become the one who are able to kind of control, at the same time also accumulate this data. So when we talk about migration research, then I think as a migration scholar, we have to really think, what can we do about it? So the other issue is then we have to ask or mention about the state responsibilities and citizen rights. That previous speakers also call for this, because again, both Indonesia and Philippines, I think, is so very clear. Maybe other states, other nations too, how important is the role of the state. So I think we have to, as an academia and civil society groups, to ask about the state responsibilities on these difficult situations. And of course, then I think, as I say earlier, that we have also to see how the citizens kind of right, yeah, on this, maybe the right to get the proper information, the right to get the data, and so on and so on. And I think it's becoming a kind of more important issues at the moment. And then, of course, at the end, is there a new migration order? I think this is an open and broad question. I think we can ask ourselves, and in our maybe future research, whether there is a kind of new migration order in the horizon, in the near future, on the maybe on the future. So this is the kind of questions who, in my view, might be help us to find or formulate or propose new kind of research, and what kind of question we have to ask in the future. So this is the last uh, the last slide, Stella, and
Okay.
so it's not really a conclusion, but it's again a question that I think we need to understand new kind of migration paradigm. It's also an open questions, yeah, who actually the actors in this kind of new situations and what kind of power relations we will see, and this is also important. What kind of regulation will be coming out or already laid out in the response both the state and the civil societies to this COVID-19. Still, I think, in my view, we are anticipating uncertainties, and I hope. Well, that's again my views. We have to see what is the worst case scenario could happen. I think again, as academics and also as a citizens, we have to really think about this, because we can speculate what will happen, but of course, I think at the moment, I think there are a kind of uncertainties. Although in Indonesia, for example, we have started vaccinations and so on and so on, but I think the people at the health community still not quite convinced whether we can really handle the impact of COVID-19 in the near future.